Alright, this time I'm going to cover doing a fade to black on the screen, and I want to do this without the use of an image. There's a pretty well-known Godot hack where you use a black image and then just adjust the transparency on that image, or you attach it to an object in your scene. I find that kind of cumbersome, so I want to do it with a shader. We are going to add a color rect to the scene, but it'll be done in code and then just popped off afterwards. So this is the shader code. If you don't know how to add one of those, you just go create new resource and then go to shader. And you can just, then you create that file and you can add that, and you can edit that over here in the shader editor. So if you're not already there, click shader editor and you should be able to drag your file in here if it's not already there. Shader type canvas items for 2D. We're going to get the screen texture like so, and this is going to be our main variable here, the fade progress. This just means it goes between 0 and 1. So what we're ultimately doing here, we're just getting the screen texture, and then the color RGB values we're going to change according to this fade progress. So if you imagine this fade progress is 0, we have 1 minus 0. So we're multiplying by 1 with it, before it does anything, which is obviously not changing anything. So as that goes up, we're multiplying by a number that brings it closer and closer to 0, which in color terms means closer and closer to black. So just to demonstrate it, I'm going to add a color rect. This will be done in code again, but this just helps us visualize. I'm going to drag the shader in here, drag the shader in here, drag.
He must be the stupidest son of a bitch alive.
I'm going to create a material first. Shader material, go in here, and then drag the shader in here. There we go. So fade to black, and you can see it put the color rect up here. So I'm going to just make it big enough to see. So you can see as it is with the shader parameter, which since we've made this uniform, we expose this here. That makes fade progress show up here. So here, when we grab that and gradually increase it, we go gradually to black. So there's our shader, but we don't want to have that object hanging around. So I'm going to delete that, and that's why we can do this in code. And I'll show what I mean. So I have a little node helpers class here because this is a function you might want to call from various different scenes, and that is added to the globals. So in project settings under globals here, you see node helpers. That needs to be added in there so it can access the node properties and everything. This is just a little helper function for the helper function. We just need to get the upper left corner of the viewport, and then we return the camera position. I'm not sure that's absolutely necessary, but I do it. We have to give a position to the color rect. So we're getting the current viewport and getting the current camera, in this case camera 2D, and then returning the position of that camera, or just a blank vector 2 if there wasn't a camera position. So the actual fade to black method here, this is the one you would want to call from whatever scene you want to fade to black, and we're returning a tween here, and I'll show you why. But just to get the fade to black functionality, we just need to get the viewport. That's the way I can pass it in here and not have a super long expression here, and then get the screen resolution. So we're getting the visible rectangle of the screen, size X and size Y. And using here, I'm not sure how Godot would handle this on the back end, but I feel like this is a safe enough way to do it. Basically what that means is using this variable, this is the color rect, the new color rect. Once the code's out of scope, once we've run this, basically that should get disposed of, so we don't leave a color rect object in the scene, especially if you were storing it in memory. Then it's liable to be hanging out there, and you don't want to create more and more of them, obviously. I haven't actually tested that functionality, but I'm pretty sure that should be safe. Anyway, so you want visible set to true, obviously. The screen resolution we just got right here. Z-index, I set it to 10 just because I have nothing anywhere near that, but the point here is it needs to be above anything else in the scene. Otherwise, they're going to be on top of your fade to black, which will, you could use that too if you've got one thing you want to see in front of the background. But yeah, most of the time you'll probably want it to be above everything. Position, that's what this little helper method's for. We give the position to spawn the color rect at, basically. And then, so using that fade rect variable, we're going to load the shader file that we just looked at. We're going to create a shader material and point it to that shader file. So now we need to set the material of that color rect we just created to that new shader material. Pretty simple. And then we're going to add a child. So this method takes in a node, which will be whatever scene you want the fade to attach to, or the scene you want to fade out. And then this float is just going to say how long you want it to take to darken. And actually, one last thing I want to add is be mindful of what node you add it to. So in my case, we've got this battle area Narsh Plains scene. So it might seem like I'm adding that color rect to the root node here, but that's not the case. And the reason is because I have this battle canvas scene, which actually has all of these UI objects on it. And you can see that that's this whole template. That way you can add this whole thing to any background. But the point is, if I add it to just this owner node here, then it won't actually work the way I want it to, because no matter how high you set that Z index, it's still going to render the child after anything in this scene. So it won't go over the menus in that case. So you'll note in the code that the node I'm passing in is that battle canvas. So again, this battle controller is attached to that main node for sure, but I'm getting a child of it so that I can render that fade out on the, so to speak, bottommost node that matters. So this is optional. I was just playing with this, and you can set this. This is basically setting it to like 1/4 dark right when it adds the material. So, no need for that. I was just playing with it. You could add that as a parameter if you really wanted to, like say, start half darkened and then go from there, whatever you want. The fade tween, obviously the tween is going to be what gradually takes the shader's value from whatever it starts at to this destination. So you want it to ultimately be 1, which will be completely black, and it's going to take however many seconds you pass in to do that. So the reason we want to return this tween is because oftentimes you're going to want to have some control over this. This is where it gets called from the battle, the end of the battle, and the fade tween gets returned, so it's into a variable here when I call it. And this is why I want the tween to be returned, is you can do tween callback. This is a good way to run code after a tween is finished. So callable from, and then the parentheses here, that's just an anonymous function basically, and this lambda expression and brackets. That basically means run this code after it's done. That's all you really need to know. So this is what ends the battle entirely, sets all the variables back, unsubscribes from events, and then pops the scene off of the tree, basically, and then you're going back to the overworld. But obviously you don't want that to run right when the fade out starts. You want it to run after that. So in order to have that kind of control for this functionality, you need to get the tween back. You might have a situation where you don't need that, and you could just call it and not worry about what gets returned. But I think in a lot of cases you probably want to have that so you can do something like this. So right now I have it taken 0.75 seconds, so let's just exaggerate that obnoxiously just because we're looking at that for the very purpose of this video. Alright, let's get rid of this pesky Rhinotaur. Okay, so I'll press this, press A, and after this it'll start the end battle method there. Here we go, and off the screen it goes, and we're back.